Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, Israel has reached the halfway point toward its previous high of active coronavirus infections. The Knesset has approved increased fines for citizens not wearing masks in public, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that the country could be headed for another lockdown if the daily number of new cases does not decrease. Hospitals have been put on alert and instructed to prepare their coronavirus wards for possible reopening. Israel has seen a consistent rise in infections since the economy was restarted, and many are calling for drastic measures to curb the spread of the potentially deadly virus.
The Hezbollah terror group released a video threatening to fire precision-guided missiles on Tel Aviv. The Iranian proxy army warned that it possesses the capability to hit very precise targets anywhere in Israel. Terror leader Hassan Nasrallah said, "We can not only strike the city of Tel Aviv, but we can also hit precise targets within Tel Aviv." Jerusalem has expressed concern over Iranian entrenchment in Syria and Lebanon and has repeatedly warned Beirut and Damascus that they are responsible for all activities emanating from within their borders. Security sources believe that the terror group is in possession of 150,000 rockets and is working to convert and manufacture precision-guided missiles.
Israel's defense minister is warning that Iran's rogue atomic program threatens the Jewish state and global stability. Benny Gantz accused Tehran of repeatedly violating the Obama-brokered nuclear deal, which was supposed to curb its nuclear capabilities in exchange for copious amounts of money and sanctions relief. The Israeli defense chief praised the International Atomic Energy Agency for recently passing a resolution criticizing the radical Islamic Republic for denying access to IAEA inspectors. The foreign ministry in Jerusalem said the resolution corroborates all of Israel's claims regarding Iran's continued covert nuclear activity. It also said that Tehran continues to systematically violate all commitments it has signed and is working to hide evidence and disrupt investigations in order to deceive the international community.
Several of the groups that have filed complaints against the United States and Israel in the International Criminal Court have ties to terror organizations. According to a report from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, the so-called human rights groups that are demanding ICC investigations into Israel and the U.S. are linked to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This group has been listed as a terrorist organization by the United States and the European Union. The JCPA accused the ICC of capitulating to relentless pressure from these groups and said the International Criminal Court has been weaponized for use against Israel and the United States.
The United Nations Middle East envoy chose a very undiplomatic stance by attending a Palestinian demonstration in Jericho last week. Nikolai Mladenov spoke at the rally, which was protesting Israel's bid to broaden its sovereignty throughout Judea and Samaria. Arabs feel that when Israel extends Israeli law throughout the Jewish heartland, it will interfere with their desire to create a Palestinian terror state in the region.
Washington has imposed rigorous sanctions against Syria in hopes of pushing Damascus into ending its decade-long civil war. Officials with the Trump administration warned that many more penalties should be expected in the coming weeks. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said, "We will not stop until Assad and his regime stop their needless, brutal war against the Syrian people and the Syrian government agrees to a political solution to the conflict." The sanctions specifically target 39 companies and individuals that have played a key role in obstructing a peaceful political end to the conflict. The order also singles out Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and First Lady Asma Assad by name. Pompeo noted that Asma Assad has become one of Syria's most notorious war profiteers. These crushing sanctions come as Syria has fallen into a severe economic crisis after 10 years of a violent civil war, which has ripped the country apart. The currency collapse has led to soaring prices, leaving the Syrian public unable to afford food or basic supplies.
A Palestinian group operating in Jerusalem has lost a significant grant from the European Union after refusing to sign an anti-terrorism clause. The Badil Resource Center for Palestinian Resistance and Refugee Rights refused to sign the anti-terrorism affidavit, which requires that none of the EU funds be transferred to terrorist organizations. Arab officials claim that the statement criminalizes the Palestinian struggle. Olga Deutsch, the vice president of the Jerusalem-based NGO Monitor, applauded the EU for its firmness in the application of its anti-terrorist clause. She said there's no doubt that radical groups like Badil, who promote anti-Semitism and the rejection of Israel, will never commit to fighting terrorism.
The PA is reporting that several Arabs were injured in clashes with IDF soldiers who were guarding a large group of Israelis praying at the burial site of the biblical patriarch Joseph. This Jewish shrine is located in the heart of the Palestinian-controlled city of Nablus, known in the Bible as Shechem. The tomb has been looted and burned several times, and the Jewish pilgrims who come to pray there have been mercilessly attacked by Arabs. The IDF coordinates monthly visits to the site where it protects faithful Jews who wish to pray at Joseph's tomb. These soldiers are often the victims of rock attacks, gunfire, and Molotov cocktails while guarding the holy site. This was the second visit to Joseph's tomb since the coronavirus lockdown and follows the vow of PA leader Mahmoud Abbas to end all security cooperation between the PA and Israel.
A new rechargeable battery is being designed in Israel, which could bring the Jewish state to the forefront of the renewables revolution. Israeli researchers at the Technion University have been collaborating with an American company that produces rechargeable batteries to develop a cheaper, more effective unit to store solar and wind energy. The power cells will be made of zinc and bromine, which are both relatively inexpensive. Bromine is mined locally in Israel. In fact, Israel Chemicals is the world's largest producer of the element. Matthew Seuss, the lead laboratory researcher on the project, said they are hoping to create the world's new key storage system, as well as helping Israel. He explained that in a country with so much sunshine, where bromine is relatively plentiful, this project can be a catalyst for bringing Israel to where it should be, at the forefront of the renewable energy revolution.
The European Parliament has approved the Open Skies Agreement with Israel, which will give the Jewish state greater opportunities in travel and tourism. This is a ratification of a temporary agreement that was signed in 2013, which led to a drop in airfares between European countries and Israel. This pact created a significant increase in tourism to the Jewish state and allowed Israelis to affordably travel throughout Europe.
Tel Aviv University's cybersecurity course has been ranked the best in the world. The class, which is offered free online, provides its students with an in-depth understanding of important subjects in the field of cybersecurity, such as cryptography, security of identification systems, attacks and defenses on the Internet, and familiarity with viruses and other malware. Yuval Schreibman, the director of Tel Aviv University Online, said, "To our great joy, Israel is considered a leader in the field of cybersecurity. Therefore, this new course attracts many young people who want to train in security."
Jerusalem's handling of the coronavirus pandemic was rated as one of the best in the world. A new study released by The Economist analyzed countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in their response to COVID-19. Israel scored very well and placed just below New Zealand, Norway, Austria, and Germany. These nations all reported fewer death rates than other countries in the OECD, and they continued to provide medical services to patients who did not have coronavirus. The article noted that these countries were able to contain the plague because they responded quickly.
Israel is reportedly preparing for a major wave of immigration post-coronavirus. Many Jews have struggled with being unable to visit their homeland during the global pandemic and have decided to make Israel their permanent home. Israel's Minister of Aliyah, Pnina Tamano-Shata, briefed the Knesset, telling lawmakers that Israel is expecting an influx of 90,000 immigrants by the end of the year 2021. This compares to 35,463 new Olim last year. There's been a 400% increase in Aliyah requests from North America and 3 times the number of immigration inquiries from France. Karen Hayesod is ready to welcome these new Israelis home and is prepared to assist them with their absorption into their new life in Israel.
40 Israeli Air Force cadets earned their wings and are officially IAF pilots. This group of elite airmen and women began with a class of 600 trainees accepted to the 180th flight course. More than 2/3 dropped out within the first year, and ultimately only 40 Air Force officers completed the course. The graduation ceremony was held on the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Israeli Defense Forces and was attended by close family members as well as a special guest of honor. Mordechai Raflovitz fought for the Etzel during the creation of the State of Israel. His granddaughter was one of 3 women to complete the prestigious course and receive her pilot's wings. He said, "I feel in my heart that I cannot contain my joy and pride." He added that he sees his granddaughter as part of the strength of the Air Force, the IDF, and the entire country. That concludes the news portion of our show. Please stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Sam Grundwerg. He's the world chairman of Cadets Yesod. Sam, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
So Sam, this is the 100-year anniversary of Cadets Yesod. How was Cadets Yesod even in existence 100 years ago?
Well, we were established in 1920 as part of the national institutions of Israel. There are 4 national institutions that predate the State of Israel as part of the modern Zionist dream, of course, of fulfilling biblical prophecy. And we already started working to garner support from communities and friends of Israel from all around the world to help build the state that was on the way.
Cadets Yesod means the foundation fund, and you definitely built all the foundations of Israel, El Al, Zim, the shipping magnet, the cities across the community. What was some of the big advances that you've seen over the years when it comes to Cadets Yesod?
Well, as you mentioned, Cadets Yesod in the early days, it was all about, as you said, the foundation fund, about pooling together and raising the resources that were necessary to fulfill this modern-day Zionistic dream of the State of Israel. So in the early days, it was everything from buying land and getting the land ready and putting together the national institutions. It was real state building. And then over time, as the needs changed, our support was for anything that was on the top of the national priorities of the State of Israel. Because Cadets Yesod, as the foundation fund, we have a seat at the table of official Israel, and whatever the national priorities are, that's what we support. So today it's mostly Aliyah, bringing new immigrants to Israel, which over the years, and we're very proud to say that in our decades and decades of existence, we've helped bring over 3.5 million new immigrants to Israel over the years.
We're now in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and you have a huge task ahead of you. Apparently, Aliyah requests are through the roof. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I actually just this morning was meeting with my friends and colleagues at the Jewish Agency for Israel. They're our strategic partners. We work together in raising the funds necessary, and they work together with the government of Israel, all of us, in actually bringing the new immigrants. And as you mentioned, as a result of the coronavirus crisis and the way that it was handled in Israel, and also unfortunately because of some of the effects that we've seen around the world in Israel, we've seen the Anti-Semitism rear its ugly head, all kinds of conspiracy theories in different parts of the world about the Jews and just terrible hatred that we've seen. So all of that put together has caused a peak in interest in Aliyah, in new immigration. Anything from, we saw headlines talking about a wave of 100,000 new immigrants. And just to put that into perspective, the average for the last several years is anywhere between 30 to 35,000 new immigrants to Israel per year from all around the world. So 100,000 is very significant. But even if it's less than 100,000, the expectation and the anticipation is that there will be a big wave of Aliyah. So together with the government of Israel, ourselves, we're gearing up for that, and it's going to require a lot of resources.
Well, you're also reaching out to Christian communities around the world. Why do you think Christians would want to be involved in helping people make immigration, Jews come back to the land of Israel?
Well, first of all, I think we've seen this over the last decades, our Christian friends and supporters understanding that our shared Judeo-Christian values have come together in helping to see the fulfillment of biblical prophecy in modern state of Israel, in returning to having the Jews return to their ancestral homeland after a couple thousand years, And our beliefs dovetail here, and it's been just terrific to see that friendship and support. And it's very interesting, you mentioned our 100 years. We actually, one of the very first representatives of Keren HaYesod, going back to our early days, who would go around the world and help raise money, was actually one of the first of the modern Christian Zionists, John Henry Patterson, who came from England and then fought here to help protect the Jews. And he would actually go, and he was one of our Keren HaYesod representatives. So from our history, the support and friendship with our Christian Zionist friends goes back a long way, and it's very important.
We're seeing a lot of Christian support for Aliyah from Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Jews are coming home in record numbers. Just this last few months during the coronavirus pandemic, we've seen hundreds of Ethiopians come home. What do you expect is going to happen with Ethiopian Aliyah?
So first of all, it's been really heartwarming to see, and for me and for my organization that I have the privilege to be the chairman of, to see that even during this crisis that Aliyah continues. And especially from places like Ethiopia. Just to give you an idea, I believe in the month of March alone, we brought together with our friends of the Jewish Agency and the State of Israel, brought over 1,000 new Olim, and it's continued in the months since then as well. Ethiopia, as you know, it's been very challenging in the last few years. There are still a few thousand Jews there that are waiting to come. Now, hopefully that there's a new government here in Israel, we'll be able to get that going and to bring them as quickly as possible. There was a government decision last year to bring 1,000. I think we ended up bringing less than 1,000. A lot of it had to do with the politics here and the fact that we had an interim or outgoing government. So we expect now, and we're going to demand, to bring those new immigrants. And interestingly, the new Minister of Aliyah and Absorption, her name is Penina. She's originally from Ethiopia. She came on Aliyah when she was 3 years old. So I believe she's 30 plus. And I'm proud to say that Keren HaYesod and Keren HaYesod support, together with support from our Christian friends around the world, helped to bring her and her family members all of those years ago. And now, to fast forward to where we are today, a new Israeli government, a new Minister of Aliyah and Absorption, who was born in Ethiopia, came here on Aliyah, and now, hopefully, with her at the head of that ministry, will help us push forward to bring as many of those Ethiopian Jews on Aliyah as we can this year.
And we're seeing, as you mentioned, a rise in anti-Semitism around the world. It's being bolstered by this anti-Semitic blood libel that we're hearing with the coronavirus pandemic. But we're expecting to see a lot more Aliyah from Europe this year. What kind of challenges are there in bringing Jews home from Europe?
You know, our organization, we work very closely with the communities in Europe. And besides the anti-Semitism that you mentioned, they of course also were hit the hardest in terms of the coronavirus crisis. We're in touch with communities in places like in Italy, France, Spain, Germany. Those communities are really in crisis. They're really in crisis. And I think the fact that they've seen how well Israel has managed through this crisis up until this point, that together with the economic situation there and the anti-Semitism, so all of those are contributing factors for the rise in the increase to come on Aliyah. It's the same challenges really, it's resources, and that's why we do the work that we do, Keren HaYesod, and that's why the support and friendship from our friends around the world, and especially our Christian friends of the world, is so crucial.
Sam, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
My message is, first of all, a message of gratitude. Myself, being here in Israel, the chairman of a national institution representing Jewish communities all around the world, more than 60 communities in 45 countries, we're so grateful for the partnership, the solidarity with our Christian Zionist brothers and sisters around the world. Your support is critical. Your moral support, your financial support, your political, diplomatic support. When you're able to come visit, pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and there should be blessings for all of you and blessings for Israel.
Thank you, Sam, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod United Israel Appeal. I'm Sam Grundwerg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. The story of the Ethiopian Jews returning to their homeland have moved people around the world. Let's listen to the story of two individuals who are making a profound difference. God bless you from Jerusalem.
A mission to Ethiopia. Through their deep faith, Roy and Yuklin Chen, a devout Bible-believing Christian couple from Hong Kong, received a sign from heaven, revealing their personal mission in life. They found it in an amazing series of inspired events that took them on a transformative spiritual journey along a road strewn with signs and wonders to help realize God's promise to return the exiled people of Israel back to their ancestral homeland.
In 2006, on November the 11th at 5 o'clock in the morning, the Lord woke me up and started to tell me to look up different books, chapter 11, verse 11, which is that He will bring His children from all corners of the world back home, including places like Cush. After we found out that Cush is Ethiopia and was praying, meditating on Psalm 87, suddenly the Lord says, bring the Ethiopian Jews back.
They traveled all the way from Hong Kong to Ethiopia, where they were joined by Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod, who is tasked with bringing the rest of the Ethiopian Jews back to Israel.
After 2 years of hearing from God, a specific assignment that we now have a chance to actually participate in something so historically significant. We felt the Lord telling us to actually meet with the remaining Ethiopian Jews, to encourage them, to remind them that Father God, Abba, has not forgotten them, but that in His perfect time, He will bring them back, His sons and daughters.
The Lord says, stop everything and write everything down. And He gave us Isaiah 17, 18, and 19. And then He says, call the world 777. We didn't understand what it meant. This year is the year 5777. So we wondered whether this is the year that we are to call the world to support the Aliyah of the Fellowsh Mura and of the other lost tribes.
The Israeli government has just authorized the movement of, at the time, the last batch of Ethiopian Jews back to Israel. And the operation was going to be called Operation Wings of the Dove. This is the piece of jewelry that I picked up for my wife. And the name of the operation was called the Wings of a Dove. I showed it to everyone at the meeting, and everyone was totally shocked. All of us started to weep. This was a divine appointment.
Inspired by the Ethiopian Jewish community's love for the God, state, and people of Israel, this journey strengthened their determination to fulfill this biblical prophecy and inspire others to help bring an exile of almost 3,000 years to a final close.
We feel very blessed to be here with you, because we were sent to come here. We just want to make an appeal, if we can, and ask that you, as you watch this and hear our story, that you would also first pray for the Ethiopian Jews, that they would be able to be brought back quickly, safely, and that secondly, whether God has called you also to support this movement.
We have visited their camp in Gondor. Many of them have died while waiting to go home.
Together, we will bring all our brothers and sisters back to Jerusalem. Toda rabba. Thank you very much.
Thus said the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up my hand to the nations, and set up my standard to the peoples. And they will bring your sons into their bosom, and your daughters will be carried on their shoulders. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 22.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, we're expecting a massive wave of Aliyah from Jewish communities all around the world. Help us bring them home, and let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
My dear friends, the centennial anniversary of the Sanremo Conference is a chance to celebrate a seminal moment in the history of Zionism. At Sanremo, the victorious Allied powers of World War I recognized the Jewish people's right of self-determination. Those powers ratified and pledged to implement the Balfour Declaration. 3 years earlier, British Foreign Minister Lord Arthur Balfour, speaking on behalf of his government, had called for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Now, in ratifying that historic declaration, Sanremo recognized a fundamental truth. The Jewish people are not foreign colonialists in the land of our forefathers. The land of Israel is our ancestral homeland. My friends, for decades I've been fighting those who've sought to deny the millennial connection of the Jewish people to our homeland. I'm proud to say that the decades-long struggle has borne fruit. 3 months ago, the Trump peace plan recognized Israel's rights in all of Judea and Samaria. And President Trump pledged to recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Jewish communities there and in the Jordan Valley. A couple of months from now, I'm confident that that pledge will be honored, that we will be able to celebrate another historic moment in the history of Zionism. A century after Sanremo, the promise of Zionism is being realized. It's being realized because we never stop fighting for our rights, and your efforts are part of that fight. Thank you for celebrating this historic occasion. Thank you for fighting for the rights of the Jewish people. Thank you for working to help secure the Jewish future.
The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Bless Israel by supporting Keren Hayesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible. To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all your Israel updates.